Hello and welcome to Conversations from the A&amp network. In this episode I speak to Kerry, an adult adoptee. She lives in Kenya and runs the Footprint Family Charity, providing education and healthcare for orphans. Kerry shares her experience of being adopted and the challenges of looking for her birth mother and father, the isolation of that search, and the experiences of reuniting with her birth family. As always, if you've experience of adoption, fostering or special guardianship from any perspective, personal or professional, and would like to share that on the podcast, please get in touch through the Facebook page, the app formerly known as Twitter, or you can email us at anfpodcast@gmail.com.
My name's Kerry Watson. I'm 59 years of age, and I was born in obviously 1964 during the closed adoption era. I was adopted by Sheila and Ron Jones, who were led to believe they couldn't have children of their own. And the sad thing was I had a brother called Dean. I still have a brother called Dean, adopted brother, who they adopted within 2 years later, really. And I think that one of the big struggles with it all is that, I was led to believe that, they were together from a very young age and they went through a long courtship and they then got married, they struggled to have children and went down the adoption route with the church, I believe, in the 1960s. And that was kind of the way it went, as I was led to believe. And after 2 years after adopting me, they adopt my brother, like I said. And then within 12 months, my dad had left the marriage. My adopted father had left the marriage and left my mum, and he was starting a business, led to believe, and kind of had this relationship with his secretary and had gone. And so left my mum, who kind of had dreamt of this 2.4 children relationship and all her life, I think, and was left then without her husband, who she absolutely adored and always had done, and these two children that she absolutely adored. And there's no doubt about it. My adoptive mum has now passed away 5 years ago. And as much as I suppose, we've had a difficult last few years. After she found out I did some searching, she put her life on the line for us. She'd do anything and everything, worked hard all her life. And even probably when she married the second time, it was out of that trying to create that family environment, I believe, which wasn't that successful for her. The guy, my stepfather, was quite a volatile man, which was totally different to my adoptive father. But anyway, it was awful time. At the time, I suppose, when when we're just growing up as children, we you don't see that. It's not until you're an adult that you can start to understand, that pain that she must have gone through. Not just, not being able to have children and then having her dream family. Then everything within 2 years had been turned upside down again, and she was left on her own. So I think from that reason, although I was never told I was adopted until I was, I remember the day well. So I must have been about 11. I remember the house we was in. I remember sitting on the old green candlewick bedspread. And I think at the time, she chose the most wording that she'd obviously been told of many, many years ago. It was it's all very, when you start listening to adult adoptees now, it's always all very familiar wording. It was, Kerry, I need to tell you were adopted. We love you very much. You were very special. You were chosen. I was like, okay, what does that mean then? I was chosen, that kind of thing. And it was left like that. It was just left like that. I don't know any more. I don't know any less. And so I think I found myself in a situation where I left it like that, knowing I was adopted, knowing I was loved. I had all the, I grew up in a, reasonable, kind of household that, I had dancing lessons and music lessons and went to school, and, I didn't have to kind of need for anything on that terms. But there was this massive gap of who am I then? And because I'm an inquisitive person, I suppose, or, I've never, ever been searching for another mum or another dad, ever. But because I had no support or help, or there was no help or support to help me through explaining to my adoptive parent, let's say my mum to start with, because mum and dad obviously wasn't around at that point, and not wanting to hurt her any further, I kept it all within. So I kind of grew up in this, my teenage years, in this quite a volatile relationship, I suppose, with my second stepfather. And didn't want to just ask any questions to my mum about, well, why did that happen? How did, all those questions had running around in my head. And then, to be honest with you, I married myself quite early. I was married when I was 20, and it was quite to get out of a relationship I was in a family environment. Like I said, it just wasn't. It didn't feel good at the time, but still no answers from who am I moment, really. Nowadays, I think, you can relate that, adoptive children have a book this thick, with every bit of detail in it possible. And that wasn't the case. And it was like, well, surely, who am I? There must be somebody who knows. So it was when after I got married, and I kind of started thinking, right, I need to do some searching. And I think I just started going into Birmingham electoral registers and looking for all sorts of information. And then eventually I found that I could go to the social services in my local town and actually find this information. So I made an appointment and I was able to go as an adopted adult. But I went in and came out with just this one little bit of paper that said, it says you were adopted 1964 September. Mother had blue eyes. She was an office clerk at somewhere in West Bromwich, and your dad was a greengrocer. Thank you very much. Goodbye. That. And I'm like, I came out thinking, what's that about? Surely that's not, is that somebody's life? Is that what I was valued at as a baby? So then, I mean, to be honest with you, a few years later, my adopted brother came to me and said, Kerry, we don't talk a lot, but I believe you've been doing some searching, and can you help me? And I was at this point starting to get myself in such a deep hole with it all. I was like, no, God, I can't cope with that. But I did go with him. I did take him with me to the social services, the same office, and at least I went in as Kerry, and I came out as Kerry. But we walked in there with me and Dean. My brother's called Dean. We walked in, and he was told he was called Stephen. And he came out just completely, utterly lost, with the same very little bit of information. So anyway, my kind of life continued, and I married again, and kind of stable relationship as such. And I was about to have my first child, and I was still right in the middle of kind of doing lots of searching. And I used to compartmentalize it. I can't explain it. This is how my life has been, where I wanted to be Kerry, who was the wife, the one that worked and did everything else, but also was Kerry, the one that was also searching for something. She didn't even know what she was searching for. So I became very good at that, which is, I don't know whether that's a bad trait, really, because I feel like a chameleon sometimes. You're a different person. Anyway, I was about to have. Or did I have Lee at that point, my first child? And I was given at this particular time when I went to the social service office at an address of which I wrote to quite a few years before that. And anyway, out of the blue, I received a letter, and it was actually from my birth mother, and saying that, this had been like a cloud lifted off her shoulder, and that, I'd made this contact. And she'd like to meet me. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. This is like, oh my God, this makes it real. This is a person. But at the same time, all the time that I've been doing this, besides my husband at the time, and maybe a couple of close friends, I'd never discussed this with anybody. So it was all very much on paper, on pen, just a few comments here and there. It wasn't long discussions. And all of a sudden, I'd received this letter that was like, oh my gosh, this is the handwriting of my birth mother. The silliest of things that you try and not associate with. So Anyway, along of it was, I did go and meet her, and, you know, looked at her knees, looked at her fingers, you know, it was all those things that you think, oh gosh, I want to associate you with. Do you look like me kind of moment? And it was all of a sudden, it was opened a can of worms that I never imagined in a million years I would. And because I think this is the crux of it, there was no counselling, there was no support mechanism to know how to deal with such a situation. And I couldn't go to my adoptive parents, no way on this earth. And nobody else could really understand how it must feel as an adopted person to feel so lost and to so not know who you are. So it was all, you know, very, very quiet. And I had to go back then to being mum and going to work. And, you know, that never happened. All of a sudden, maybe, you know, I did get to meet her. But then the sad thing about that was, as much as I got to listen to her story, which I will explain as well, which is really, really sad in terms of, you know, she had 59 years of knowing that she had to give this baby away and didn't want to, which, you know, my story could have been horrific, and it is in lots of ways, but it's not in the terms of the fact there was I don't know what makes it worse. There's a lady in the 1960s who found herself pregnant, you know, at 21, you know, a relationship like probably all teenagers have these days. And maybe, you know, okay, she couldn't do anything about it, but her parents, the stigma around it made her, that's it, you know, you go in, we're going to send you to mother and baby home, and that's where you will stay. That's where you have that baby. Then you will come back like nothing's happened. Your job will be left open for you. I'm like, can you really do that to a person, you know, as a parent? And, you know, she told me this story. And so there's nothing not to believe about it, you know. I mean, and she described the river she used to walk down when she was pregnant with me. The clothes she used to knit. And she said, I always dreamt that, you know, that my parents, her parents, would come along and you know, they'd change their minds. And then when I gave birth to you, it was like I was shunted away into this hospital. And because I was an unmarried mother, she was in a different part to the moms, the ordinary, you know, mums are with marriage and all of that.
Yeah.
She said, I thought when they come and see you, they'll change their mind. And she said, they never even looked at you. And now I'm a grandma. I'm a nanny of 11-year-old. You know, in fact, she's on my screen now. Yeah, she's 11 now. But, you know, I'm like, is this human? Is stigma? It's being thought of as in such an embarrassment is more than losing your child and your, you know, grandchild. But, you know, that's how it was. And it was as simple as that. You know, she described how she was called by the nurses to come into the office, if you like, in this mother and baby home. She thinks she had me for about 8 weeks, I think she said. And no, not 8 weeks. I don't think it was that long. But she said, I remember them saying, get your baby prepared. And she brought these, I've still got the dress. I've got the dress that, you know, that I was given away in. And she said, I walked down this great big staircase. Like it was a surreal situation. And I walked in this great big office. I handed you over to, I think it must have been, she said it was Mr. and Mrs. Shaw. No, not Shaw. That was her name. Mr. and Mrs. I can't think of their name now. But anyway, they were kind of foster carers. And they walked out the door and I was never to see again. So you go in one door with a baby, you go out the other. You know, that even for me breaks my heart. You know, how can that be right? And, you know, this is why there's an adopt movement right now that's, you know, nobody can take that time back. But somebody's got to recognise that wasn't right. That wasn't humanly right. You know, and I'm not saying there were some babies that shouldn't be adopted. Like you just said, there's clearly a lot of children out there that are desperate for, you know, care and protection and in a loving environment, which is exactly obviously what you're doing. So, you know, but then there's this situation where, you know, there's mothers out there that have this massive hole ripped out of them, you know, a heart, you know, because of this kind of mistake, so-called mistake they've made. And that's what happened. And she had to go back then to her workplace and get on the bus every day, in her words, and go back to work, and nobody ever spoke about it again. So when after I met her and I kind of had this story, you know, I was a bit hesitant. I wanted to be involved with her, but I didn't want to also. I'm a grown up and I'm an adult, and I know she got a family of her own. She'd had 2 more boys after this with a husband who she married after that. And the sad thing about it was, her husband, when she told him that he actually knew that she'd had a baby. He didn't marry not knowing that this situation had occurred. But when he found out the reality that I'd contacted her, he completely lost the plot, in terms of, to the point where I had a letter at one point saying he was going to commit suicide because I'd appeared in her life again. So that was another loss. It was like I was never allowed to be ever part of that family. Not as I ever wanted to be 2.4 children. I'd got my mum, you know, and as much as my dad and mum had split up, I'd got my dad in a certain way. I was never looking for that, you know, that long lost mum and dad that I'd never had. I just needed to understand and be part of something a little bit. So that was shut off again. It was completely shut off, and still is. I mean, he died 2 years ago. So imagine, this has been going on for 30 odd years. He died a couple of years ago, and it's like now all of a sudden, you know, she feels free. But it then again feels a bit too little too late. But, you know, and I have 2 older half siblings who I've met one. And, you know, this life of mine is never, ever going to heal, because it's always going to be there. I just have to try and find a way of managing it, which is why I ended up in Africa, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But, you know, it's, you know, I then went on my merry way, if you like, through this. And I don't even know, there was on my records for my father, my birth father, there was, through my searching anyway, I managed to locate a family member. And I remember going with a friend. So at this point, I think I'd still got only my one child, young child. And, you know, again, going, you know, taking Lee to school, going to work, coming back, right, I've got a day off, so let me go over and do the searching again, and let me see if I can do this. Let me try and fix all the puzzle together. Let me keep smiling through it, you know, which kind of became very good at, really, you know, and which is not a good trait, because then you become, it's like, who am I? Am I happy? Am I sad? You know, what am I? You know, how am I feeling, really? Anyway, the long of it is, when I actually found out about my birth father, I actually found out he'd been married a couple of times, a bit of a man around the town, if you like, and he'd been married before, and he'd got a couple. And I'd got all these marriage certificates that I'd managed to get from electoral registers gone by, because it's amazing what you can get. But then the one that I didn't expect to have was his death certificate. And 2 years before I literally managed to locate where he was, he'd committed suicide. And so I was left with this inquest report that kind of like, it was like even the weight of his kidneys and how he died, but I didn't know who this man was. You understand? It was like, oh my God, did he even know I was born? Did he know I was alive? Wonder whether he ever thought about me? You know, thousands, a million questions that I knew I'd never get answered. To the point where I'd found out even where he was buried. And there was such a lot of turmoil then. I still hadn't told anybody. Nothing. My marriage had broke up at that point, because I think I just felt like I couldn't cope with everything that had going on. And I remember going over to his grave, I suppose, and lying next to it, trying to get as close as I could to this person I would never know. But then realising, do you know what, Kerry? This is not the right behaviour. This is not the behaviour. You can't do this. You know, you're an adult. You know, you're obsessed with this whole situation. Mm-hmm. And I was obsessed with it. I'd sit up at night thinking that maybe, you know, Alan, my birth father, would come back to me, you know, in that kind of, you know, I'd visualised this car that he was in when he killed himself. And I did all those, it was completely bizarre behaviour. And, you know, I managed through all of that to locate another half sibling. And and through my birth father's relationship and a lady who was married to, who were amazingly supportive. It was the first time that anybody had shown me that, oh my gosh, without a doubt, you're Alan's daughter. You look like you. Let me show you some pictures of him. I can even show you a video when he used to play football. It was that opening that I suppose I've always wanted.
Yeah.
But then the obsession. Then became the obsession with these people that, oh, you know, I don't want to let them go now. I need to keep hold of them. So you're phoning every 5 minutes, you know, because one day they might say no, they'll shut the door on again. So, you know, it was just this ridiculous behaviour that was ruining my life, really, if I'm honest, because it was obsessing and trying to be mom, trying to be, you know, mom and daughter to adoptive parents and not let them know what was going on. And it was just this crazy time. And, you know, when I got to a point where I'm in such a deep hole with it all, I asked my adoptive parents if they'd come into my house, if you like. And neither of them knew that they'll both be there at the same time, but it just felt like that I've got nothing to lose. You know, I'm at this point, I don't know, I'm probably 40. I mean, you know, it's gone through all these years. And anyway, get them together and I say, look, I've got something to say. And this is not because I've ever wanted another mum or a dad. I've just wanted to know who I am. And I've been searching. Well, my adoptive father never mentioned a word. He just said, I think your problem is with me because you left me I left you and I'm sorry for that. And my mum was just completely, my adoptive mum was completely exactly behaved how I knew she would, how dare she do that to me? I'm your mom and she didn't want you. And, how do you want, and it was all, I was so lost with how to help everybody that I was just found myself in this massive hole, really. And to a depressive state, I suppose, to this kind of, no, not so depressive, like a sad state, such a sad state. And anyway, I think I felt like, so Kerry, you need to be on medication, you're depressed, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm not depressed. I'm just in such a, like an unreal world with it all. Anyway, don't not ask me how it happened, really. I was I was working still. I got 2 children I was looking after. Although at that bit, they were like, how old was Lee? Lee was nearly 18. This is my son, and my daughter was 17 nearly. So they weren't young. But anyway, I decided I was going to take my off on a volunteer program to Kenya. For the fact I wanted to go to Kenya, not for the fact that I wanted to do anything other than give myself some time and space, I think. I didn't want to go and sit on a beach for 2 weeks and read a book because that's not me. I wanted to try and take my mind off something totally different and focus on something different just for a couple of weeks. So I ended up with this gap year for grown-up adult program, helping the community out in the rural areas of Kenya for 3 weeks in November 2007. And it certainly did what it did. It took my mind off everything. So, besides me seeing comic relief or, Red Day and all that kind of stuff, and the snippets on the television that you see of kind of developing countries across the world, that was my first real experience of understanding what the hell is going on in the world. We are so unbalanced in wealth and opportunity. And, what I was seeing and witnessing can't be right, is it? That kind of moment, the poverty, and this was just like a 3-week program, but enough that I came back and went back again for 3 months the following year. And in a nutshell, and again, probably at the time I was still reaping through the fact that I needed to sort my own life out somehow or other, but ended up buying a piece of land in the back end of Kenya in conjunction with another Kenyan at the time. I mean, goodness knows how I ever thought that, through all the corruption and everything else, somebody was on my side. I don't know whether whoever believes in fate, God, or whatever you might believe in. This was never a planned moment in my life, but to the point where I'm now into the 16th year of a really big charity that I've created. It's a UK charity called the Footprints Family that look after and support vulnerable orphaned children and educate them and put them through healthcare. Now, it doesn't, in a parallel way, I can talk to the children, especially the older ones, about loss. You know, these are children who've had hideous beginnings, not just losing parents, but, you know, can you imagine in Africa, you know, there's so many kind of situations that occur, and it's just at a different level. So I do feel that has helped me in some way. I don't know, sometimes I think I don't know how, because it's the most challenging work I've ever done. But to be able to create something that's given other children opportunity to find some kind of journey, you know, where they can, through their loss, we've given them hope through education and good health care and food in their bellies to build their own life up in the future. Even there's no system here. As much as I've said that the system in the UK, you know, I don't know, 40 odd years ago with me was very simple. There's nothing like that here. If you're an orphan, you're orphan. If you survive it, great. If you don't, you're just a number. You're off, another one. Come along. You know, it's just raw survival. So, you know, the charity, I suppose, I founded, everything is just being built by hand. I've just raised money. I've gone back to the UK. I've talked to, you know, churches and schools over the years. We've done fundraising events till eventually, you know, even my adopted mum, and like I say, she's passed away now, and my dad, they both passed away. You know, I suppose they've seen, even my own children, I'm really proud, they've seen the sadness that I had. And by doing what I'm doing, it's turned my own life around in some way, because I've been able to do something to change my journey from getting in that deep hole. So I don't know whether that makes sense or not, but it kind of, you know, I don't know. My life, my personal life won't ever go away. You know, I'm still having now, you know, phone calls or texts from my adopted mother. She's still alive. She's 82, you know, and her sadness will never be erased from what she went through. But now it's, you know, I can't build a relationship up like that. It's too late to do that. And I'm happy that we've been able to meet each other, but I don't know her, really. Not know her like you would your own child, you know. You know, my adopted mum absolutely adored us. As much as, you know, we were very different, she gave me my, you know, my values, everything about who I am. You know, there is that big nature nurture moment. And I think there's a mixture, really. You know, you do value how you are brought up and what people put into your life. Like, I'm sure your children will. You know, it's not to being grateful. It's just knowing that there's people that have really loved you. I don't know. It's a hard one, but you know, by doing what I'm doing, but the journey I'm on now, or I have been for the last 15 years with the charity, I've been able to divert my negativity to something positive has really helped me, and hope to goodness it's helped lots of children and young youth over here as well.
Can I ask sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, there's lots of things as you went along, and I had lots of questions, but it didn't want to interrupt. But one of the things I thought was that you seem to have done all of this very much on your own. There's been the sense of you, quite a lonely journey that people have dipped in or dipped out or not been able to walk with you. And did you ever get any sort of think of going and getting professional support, or was that just not on the menu?
I did a couple of times when I certainly, you know, when maybe, you know, I've been to the doctors and it's you know, it's always very easy to throw pills at somebody, you know, and then you can call this number or I'll give you a leaflet and all of that. And then I had maybe twice at the most, definitely once. I remember going and paying for private counselling. But, you know, I don't know how long I've just been talking to you to get that story or that feeling, that understanding of what, how somebody could even start to help you. I was into 2 sessions of, X amount of money just to kind of give the story. And then they go, yeah, it's quite a hard one, isn't it? And I'm like, you know what? It's not going to happen. So yes, I did. And I think I've screamed out for that. Oh, I did yes, there was tell a little lie. In the beginning, there was an agency in Birmingham called Adoption Society or something. My son was 18, so we're talking a good probably 20 years ago now. And her name was Janet, and she was a little office in the back end of Birmingham somewhere. And I remember, going on the train and finding this little office and offloading. And this was actually, I think it was free. It was certainly wasn't a lot. If it was one of those societies that kind of wanted to try and help. Janet Marsh, that was the name. Sorry, Janet, if you've ever listened. But she was the one that was like, I think she turned around after I kind of opened up my heart and she said, Kerry, you're not telling me nothing that's not normal from an adopted person. Don't beat yourself up about this. And it felt like that at that point, that was quite a weight, knowing that I wasn't abnormal, that I was, being, what's the word, kind of over dramatic about things. This was stuff that was fighting with. And you're right, it's been a real lonely journey. I couldn't continue that going to Birmingham every week. And it was, I don't even know whether it's still there anymore. I doubt it very much. It was a very, very probably under, I'm not saying that Janet, I remember her name Janet. I remember she was very, I could feel she'd got an understanding behind it. Whether she was adopted herself, I don't know. But from there, I did another a private kind of counselling, and like I said, it just took kind of 2 sessions to even go down the route of, and everybody said, well, what can we help you with? And I'm like, well, I'm here. Can you not understand maybe what I'm going through and what I'm here for you to tell me how you can help me. So it was all very non-answerable, really. You didn't get very far. That's why, like I said, knowing that I could share my experiences and knowing that people might listen and think, oh my God, I know those words. I know that feeling. I know, how she's, just to share information, even if you're not getting all your answers, and having somebody else understand that feeling that you've gone through is really huge. And quite, I don't know. I just, I've read books and books now on adoption and, and I've circled things in books and think, yeah, my gosh, that's what I thought. Or, yeah, that's happened to me. But there's never, ever been any support groups as such that, or that kind of advice where you can go and sit in a circle and go, and do you know what? I'd be more than if I got the energy, I think is the word I'm looking for, to create them kind of groups where I could sit and say, right, let's share these stories. Let's not try and find, an answer to everything we're feeling, but let's try and share to understand that these feelings are real and actually acceptable. But, it's only it's even just picking up on your podcast and seeing this adoption movement on, I think it's on Facebook. And, it's like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden it's coming to the surface at our age now that we were able to talk about it. So to answer your question, no.
Well,
there was
one of the things she said before we came on, you mentioned that you felt the last 5 years have been quite different, but then that also coincides with the passing of your adoptive mother. Yeah. And was that and it sounds like it wasn't an open book subject. And so has that been a sense of liberation amidst the pain of losing someone you care about dearly?
That's a good question. I don't Not really. I think I was able to express myself before she died. I just found it really, and quite a long time before she died. I mean, she had, but she was never, my adopted mum was never ever, and she needed the support as much as I did. These, I'm sure yourself, you have to go through a process of understanding how this child might behave, or, what might be expected, or, and all of that. And my mum had nothing. She just had the small little bit of paper, that's probably from the Catholic or the Church of England, I don't know, whoever did the agreement. So we had to come to an understanding that we loved each other deeply, but we would never be able to understand the real reasons of why I searched, and it wasn't as I was trying to find another mum. So, but I felt so, I would do anything for that woman, because that woman, I don't mean that woman in terms of, this lady, let's put it that way, my adopted mum, because she'd given her life to me. So liberated, I don't know. I did, as much as I loved her dearly, I felt that she'd gone without maybe knowing how much I cared about her, and I was never wanted to hurt her feelings. Never, ever. And that she never had that chance. She'd had so many problems with her own life, I suppose, in terms of probably not being able to have children, her husband leaving her, putting her life and soul into the 2 children she'd adopted, into a bad marriage. She gave the world to my children, her grandchildren as such, not biological at all, but obviously. So I think...
Is there a loyalty? Loyalty feels a bit dismissive, but that sense of... I
think if there is that is quite a good word to use. I didn't felt not loyalty in that I was sacrificing anything to be loyal, because I just felt that was absolutely necessary. With my adopted dad, well, I've never felt... I think he loved me. I mean, his question is, I think during the time after he left the marriage, his words were, or my mum said was, this marriage isn't going to work and whatever, but I'm willing to take Kerry and you have Dean. Like we were some package of Weetabix on the shelf, And it was, my mum was like over my dead body kind of moment, and so I never really got to understand my dad's thoughts on anything. Why he adopted 2 children. Was it for the sake of my mum? Was it for the sake of what she just desperately needed children? Why would you do that? Why would you leave the family when and never really having much of a relationship with him as such. So I think maybe liberation falls into my birth mother's life. I'm wondering whether after her husband has died in the last few years, that she feels liberated enough that she can just call me when she wants to. She could message me and feel free to say, come on, let's meet up. And I'm like, and I have, don't get me wrong, her son, who's also had the same feelings over all these years. Her son must be in his 40s now. Well, he was loyal to his dad. And I think 2 years ago, I met him for the first time. And the first words he said to me was, I'm so sorry, Kerry. I'm so sorry I let this stigma of all this happening stop me, meeting you as a person. But, that's all very too late, really. My energy's gone on all that. In fact, my energy's gone on many things, because I just feel I'm exhausted with trying to find answers and trying to find a way of, stabilizing my own life. Yeah. It's been a toughie, but I don't regret anything I've done. I don't regret doing any of the searching. I don't regret anything, because it's given me some kind of, solace, if you like. It's given me some kind of understanding. I've had certain answers, pictures of people that maybe have built up this jigsaw puzzle of maybe biological family over the years. And so, but I just wish that I didn't have to do that on my own, or I had people that would have an understanding of it to help me process it better.
Yeah. You said in the middle of you talking, you said, you will never heal. You just find a way through. And that seems to be sort of really, really comes through the sense that you haven't resolved anything, but you've found a way of living that allows you to not experience the worst of those feelings.
I think, I don't know whether I've become numb to it or whether it's just a way of finding acceptance. I've read books and I've listened and there's so many adopted people, older people, I think, that, because maybe, and I can understand it totally, that maybe just cannot find any answers or resolvement to it. Or if they have found answers, they've not come to that. It's not been a happy ending. And then they turn to drugs or alcohol or, considering taking their own life. They're just so lost in the world. And I understand that extreme lengths that sometimes you go to either block it out, live with it, accept it. I'm quite proud of myself in some ways. I suppose when I look at the situation I'm in, as much as it's caused, it's been extreme, I'm on not a bad path with it, but I'll never heal from it. It's just my life. This is who I was. I was adopted into this. I was born here. I now understand for whatever reason in life, this is my journey. Yeah. And this is what I've been put on. And I've been able to, navigate through it. And I'm just sorry. Maybe I've put my family through, maybe my own kids, I've sacrificed my time with them by escaping here, if you like, to a degree. Don't get me wrong. I've always juggled, I've juggled my time, if you like. So I'm fortunate that my son works for an airline. So I'm able to get on family and friends tickets and, I'm able to jump on and off quite quickly. So, from a financial point of view, I've been so lucky that I have been able to, really share time. But then I have really juggled, to make sure I'm making everybody else's lives okay. And it is exhausting, actually. It's exhausting being the people pleaser. And I think, I'm 60 this year, got, this big number coming up where you actually look at life and think, that your biggest part of your life's over, Kerry. If you're going to be lucky enough to have good health, now's the time maybe to start thinking about, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And it's, it's not about other people. This is about me. It's really hard. I can't explain it other than, like I said, I don't regret anything. I don't wish, oh my gosh, I don't wish I wasn't adopted. I don't wish that at all. Like, this is my life and my journey. It's what I've been been given, if you like. I wasn't say thrown at them, but it is what I've been delivered for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I hope whatever I've done, however I've dealt with it, or like, I suppose when you've said, if I can give anybody else some hope from being adopted as an adult in the 60s or early 70s, late 50s, to be able to know there is ways around. And if there can be counselling now, if there can be groups to help these adult adoptees, even if it's talking through it, I'd love to be part of that. That would be for me, that would be a massive part of the healing process for me to come to help other people doing, it would.
Kerry, you've been so honest and you've really articulated your experience well, and it's just fascinating to listen to. And I think anyone listening will come away with sort of lots of food for thought and lots to reflect on. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for your time and energy. We'll put links to your website and the work that you do, the charity, into the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for letting me share. And I hope anybody that listens, they'll take one thing from it, and that is hope. Hope that, believe in yourself and you're a person, and it doesn't matter necessarily who's around you, just be you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.